Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the Riverwood Aquatics YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing a little setup video. We're going to be looking at CO2 and how to run it using a fire extinguisher. So sometimes CO2 cylinders can be quite hard to come by, especially getting the refills and things. If you're lucky enough to live in an area with a company that refills them, that's fantastic. Sometimes fish shops can do them, but sometimes you have to send them away and get them back. But we'd like to use fire extinguishers. Easy to get hold of, they can be refilled. The thread on the fire extinguisher, where you normally have that funnel, like horn piece, where you'd squirt the CO2 out of onto the fire. This is exactly the same thread as you get on a CO2 regulator. I think in the US they're slightly different, so you'll have to look into that in your region. But in the UK, we have these standard threads for the fire extinguishers and the CO2 regulators, so you don't have to worry about adapters or anything like that. I've got this huge 5 kilogram one that we're going to be adding onto the aquascaper line tank here. You can get the 2 kilogram ones, which are much smaller to fit in a smaller cabinet, but this one fits in there and it's going to last a long time. So I'm expecting this cylinder to probably last maybe 5 months. Potentially, depending on how much we put in there. We don't have to put too much CO2 into this tank because it's quite easy to grow plants. So yeah, I'm expecting to get a long time out of this. So yeah, I'll unbox the regulator and we'll do a little how-to video on how to set up CO2 using a fire extinguisher. We're going to be using the CO2 Art Pro SE series regulator. This is a dual stage regulator, which means it's really safe to use, really easy to dial in the pressure, get the right bubble count into your tank. Really reliable, I can get it out with one hand, really reliable regulator. We've got the cylinder pressure and we've got the working pressure here. You can adjust that with this. This is the needle valve, so this is fine tune how much CO2 you put into your tank. It comes with the seals, one spare, with the power pack, that's the bubble counter in there. Yeah, like I said, this thread here will screw directly onto the fire extinguisher. Right, it's time to screw it on. So we're going to get our little seal here, pop it on there. That's going to create a nice solid seal. Obviously we're operating with high pressure here. Let's make sure I've got the best angle for you. There we go. And that actually screws onto here. Directly on. So normally when you come to tighten this up with the wrench or the spanner, this is going to tip the thing forward. So I tighten it up by hand and then sort of tilt it slightly backwards. Sometimes it can take a little bit of maneuvering. So when you tighten it up, you need to make sure it's tight but not really tight. So really nip it up, but don't do it over tight because you could damage the seal in there. That's not what you want. So nice and tight but not crazy tight. There we go. That's how easy it is to attach the regulator to the cylinder, which has got nice protective covers over these gauges. Pull them off. There we go. Okay, so now we're ready to attach the bubble counter. Here's a bubble counter. That's very easy as well. Simply screws on. You've got a little washer here, a little seal. Make sure that's in place. And that just screws on there. Again, make sure it's nice and tight because this is high pressure. So we're going to want to make sure that everything is done up nice and tight, including this bit on here. So everywhere there is a seal, make sure it's tight, because you'll find a lot of times people will set it all up and then they'll find they've got a leak or something like that, and it's normally something as simple as this isn't done up tight enough, that somewhere along the line of connections there's something that's just a bit loose and it's letting some gas out. So just double check everything's nice and tight. Okay, and we'll move on to connecting the hose. So because this filter was used on the previous scape. It's ready cycled and everything, but we've got the old inline diffuser already attached, which we're going to keep on using for now. It's the Chihiros Inline Diffuser. CO2 Art do one very similar design. So we've got the hose coming out here, and on the end here you'll see a non-return valve. That's just to stop any water washing back down into the bubble counter. And also, when you remove this hose, you don't want water to come dripping out when you're trying to refill your bubble counter or do some servicing work on it or something like that. So very simple. The hose is attached to the inline diffuser, and we're going to attach that hose to the bubble counter. Right, so before we attach the hose, we want to fill up our bubble counter with water. You can use oils which don't evaporate. I prefer to use water just because it's cleaner and it doesn't get everywhere. But if you're really careful, there's no reason why you can't use like an oil. But for safety, we're using water. You will have to fill it up every now and again, but it's no big deal. I like to use a little syringe and just fill it up. Need a little bit more. Cheating and taking water out of the tank, but that's okay. So I like to fill it up, not quite to the top, but near enough. And then we get the top part of the bubble counter. Make sure the seal is in place. Screw that on, again nice and tight. So we make sure there's no leaks here, 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 and here. Here's the air line from the inline diffuser. I'm going to have to readjust myself here. Hopefully you can still see. It's as simple as pushing the hose onto here. We are a little bit tight here because this is a bigger cylinder than we used last time. But you should be able to just sort of wiggle it on. Make sure it's fully over. And then you can screw down the top and that just holds it in place. Again, nice and tight, but don't over tighten that because you will need to unscrew it fairly regularly. Okay, so that's in place. So just so the whole system connected now, we've joined the regulator to the fire extinguisher, the bubble counter, to the hose, to the non-return valve, and that's going through to the inline diffuser. So this is on the outward, so it's on the return to the tank. So the water's coming out of the tank into the filter and coming out of the filter and returning to the tank. And the CO2 is going to be diffused through here. So when it comes out into the tank, we'll get a mist of CO2 bubbles getting pushed around and diffused nicely around the tank. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to pressurize the system. So these refilled fire extinguishers come with a little tag on here just to show that they've been serviced and ready to use. Snip that off. They'll come with a pin. Hopefully you can see. There's a little pin in here, safety pin, so you just pull that out and now this is ready to be squeezed and pressurized. So with a conventional cylinder which is used for aquariums, you have a little twisty cap to release the pressure. This one is just a handle. So when we squeeze this down, you should notice the pressure gauge go up. You might hear a little hiss and a ding as it pressurizes. So make sure everything's off. And then we should squeeze this. And there we go. That's pressurized that. So now what we want to do, we want to make sure the pressure stays open. So this handle needs to be secured in place. You can use a cable tie. I tend to just use sellotape, and it's nice and easy to just cut and take off when it's ready to go. So I'm going to wrap a bit of tape to hold this down, and that will keep the pressure open. There we go, we have the system pressurized. We're looking good with the working pressure, cylinder pressure. That's taped down in place, so it's open. Now we need to connect the solenoid, and then we can start putting CO2 into the aquarium. Okay, so the power lead to the solenoid's plugged in. We then, if you can see, plug that into a timer plug down here. So we'll set it to come on. I normally go for an hour before the lights come on, and then I normally set it to go off an hour before the lights go off. You can play around with that a little bit, but I tend to stick to an hour. That seems to work. We've got the power plug here. CO2 Art one comes with a really good UK adapter, so it plugs straight in, and then it's plugged into the solenoid. Now that's on, we can start turning our gauge. I'm going to want maybe 3 bubbles per second, roughly in here. We'll install a drop checker, which will measure how much the pH is dropping, and that will give us an idea of how much CO2 we're putting into the aquarium. But yeah, that's the installation of the CO2 system onto a fire extinguisher. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. Leave some comments below if you've got anything that you want to add, any hints or tips that people might find useful. Yeah, so hopefully the CO2 going into this tank is going to accelerate the growth of the plants, make sure it's nice and lush, really healthy, and yeah, hopefully it'll grow in much quicker, and it will look like an amazing display. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.